Today on The Viewpoint, the conversation will interrogate the growing political norm called consensus and ask how democratic is consensus? How right is it that candidates buy nomination forms only for their parties to use the electoral college system to adopt a candidate? Critics of this pattern feel it is not inclusive and further discourages those with good intentions of joining political parties. Others in support feel that parties are superior to the aspirations of those who vie on their platforms, and so parties should take upper hand. Uche Gabriel is my name. Welcome to Viewpoint the Conversation. My first guest is the Executive Director of Afri Heritage Institution, a socio-economic political think tank. Ofokeko Zadike is a political scientist with special interest in development issues, particularly with respect to political economy and peace and conflict challenges. Professor Ofokeko Zadike, good to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. My second guest is joining us via the telephone, and of course, he's popularly known as Chukuma Ephraim Okenwa, aka CEO. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Uche Gabriel.
All right. Let me start with you so I can let you go quickly. You seem to be very busy this morning. While the parties have rights to how candidates emerge, the big question we're asking this morning is how democratic is the growing phenomenon of consensus candidates?
It is entirely undemocratic, at least judging from our own lack of internal democracy and stifling the propensity towards stifling the emergence of the very best candidates. And of course, you know that lastly at the moment, which has been a season of declarations, one will not shy away from the fact that there are contenders and pretenders. And of course, political onlookers and observers have actually been tracing steps of some persons who have actually come out in the public to give an impression that they are actually one of the contenders. But unfortunately, they are there as trade-offs. They are there, to help secure what is now a growing concern, a consensus, which is entirely undemocratic. Because when you have pretenders get forms, then what exactly people are actually trying to do is to use those ones as trade-offs, right? And to discourage the right candidate from expressing his genuine intention to serve the good people, and eventually that can be subverted under the pretext of consensus. So this growing concern is completely undemocratic, and it is now, I want to say something. Our politicians have found a new way of expression, of expressing their lack of regard for internal democracy. What exactly do I mean when I talk about this? There has been this issue of our leaders, elected leaders, acting like maximum rulers, seeing it as their inalienable right to decide who succeeds them. In fact, in Enugu, for instance, you could see like a billboard around the town that clearly spells out that it is the right of the governor to decide who succeeds him. So you see, Uruburu decides. That is entirely undemocratic. But guess what? Let me now tell you that our politicians have found a new way, and what they see as a more excellent way to sell that idea, which is almost now experiencing some level of resistance. The idea of anointing candidates. What exactly do they want to do? What is the strategy there? Sometime last year, we had a Chimaru make a comment, right? That it is the right of the governor. Now, I want you to observe how he ended that statement to decide who succeeds him, how be it within the ambit of democracy. What more can be more crazy than that kind of statement? Someone is robbing democracy and yet is saying it should happen within the ambit, within the boundaries of democracy. So guess what? Some of these our leaders are masquerading as Democrats, and instead of it now to just to look like they don't want to look at it to say I imposed a candidate or I just endorsed one candidate, stifling the choices or the chances of others. So guess what they want to do? Sponsor some candidates as pretenders to dissuade the real contenders from expressing their right to be voted for. And it's a growing concern. It's completely undemocratic and one that I'm happy we are mixing up issues around because it's one that should be discouraged if we must save democracy in Nigeria.
All right. The next question I have for you, primaries are considered the real elections. The reason being that it presents to us those that shall run. And sometimes the choice is which of the evils to choose, because if all the parties threw up the worst, we just end up choosing one of the terribles. Okay, so can we have, I wonder how that will happen, but can we have better primaries? How do the people insist that credible candidates emerge? Is it fair that select few chooses for all of the people?
It is really, really unfair. And unfortunately, our voter apathy and political culture has not really helped issue. Let me start with the issue of political culture in Enugu State. In Enugu, there is no opposition, any sign anywhere of opposition. Because, of course, it does appear that all of the parties are not only compromised, but, of course, the leadership does not really have a clear direction of what they want to do in politics. Because clearly, how can somebody, towards the election, you want to field governorship candidate? There were local government primaries, you never fielded any candidate, you never fielded for councillorship, and you want to start with that of the governor. How does that work? How does it work that maybe a serious political party that is going up and we even start making mad they want to challenge PDP in Enugu State? All of this is no ward meetings, no local government meetings, nothing, for whatever reason why they have remained incommunicado within themselves and within their structure is one that has kept me wondering. How is it that for all of these years, no political party interrogates the policies of Uche, no political party looked at it critically on a weekly basis to come up with press statements, where are their voices? Where has it gone to? And all of a sudden, now even an election is coming up, like anyone is trying to give any impression of a possible offering a credible opposition to PDP. It doesn't work that way. Even the party that Igbo people are looking at, like AFGAN, it has been largely infiltrated, right? Infiltrated in the sense that you have some pretenders masquerading as contenders, but they're actually there to do the game they played out last time in 2019, where we had a pretender stifle the chance of somebody who was a true contender, and the contender was in court until the governorship election ended. So we have a political culture in Enugu that does not encourage engagement. It does not encourage interrogation. And interestingly, the people that should be in politics in Enugu are just watching by the sides. And it's discouraging. Like recently when I began to express interest in politics, some people saw me as somebody who has lost my values, somebody who has lost his way, somebody who is going astray. But unfortunately, these are people that should have gone, encourage, find a political platform where we can all find the expression, decide the emergence of candidates, build the needed structure to be able to challenge this parochial style of democracy. But unfortunately, we don't see that. And it's a problem that the right people are not involved at the partisan level. They see partisan politics as the ones that is meant for the not too good in the society. And that's why we are having not too good results.
All right. Just before I let you go, the right people that want to go into politics and the good people that want to see good people go into politics and win have a puzzle, and that puzzle is to break these strongholds. Do you see do you see that happening anytime soon? Breaking this thing and getting in the right people in government.
Honestly, let me tell you that those that want big change to occur, perhaps they are just dwelling in mere wishful thinking because we've not seen the needed action. When you begin to see people that have, kept their record strong in the society, taking like even a risk of even considering the murky waters of politics, and they don't get all of the engagement, and they don't get all of the support and all of the, moral support they need from the professionals, from the leaders, even from the younger generation and the women that have complained of being relegated by the current political class. You discover that it is a case of people, wanting what they never invested. They want to reap where they did not sow. How can you want an American style of democrats, right? And you don't want to follow the American style that leads to the emergence of such kind of leaders. Tell me any place in the world, where nomination forms is bought by the candidates, except in Nigeria. Tell me also any place in the world, judging by the level of what is even the minimum wage of the country, that to buy like the ruling party now just pay their presidential for 100 million, 50 million, and they say they want to use it to know those that are serious. Interestingly, this is happening under the president, who allegedly could not buy for when it was 27.5 million. So tell me where our democracy is going, where the people are even clapping. And I saw some young people walking and laughing and saying, hey, those that want to run for president, where are they? Let them bring the 100 million. Let's see capacity. They call it capacity that you don't even know how someone made the money. The person is investing, and of tomorrow we request for return on investment. And you are there clapping and you call yourself, you are saying, tomorrow also you want the person to look for money to bribe you to vote, to perform your civic duty. When we don't perform our civic duties to politicians, what moral right do we have to demand that they perform their civic duties to us? For it is by investing in politics that we can truly make it a social contract between the people and the politicians, and not a contract between a few political gladiators and their political godsons.
All right. Thank you, Chukwumai from Okenwa. Good to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Ozadike. Let me start by asking, what are your reservations, what are your concerns with this growing phenomenon of consensus candidate?
I think it's a very interesting development. In principle, there's nothing wrong with consensus. It's about general agreement. The problem, though, is it is actually not practiced. They're not really looking for consensus. I think just yesterday, Autumn, I think that's his name, Benue State, was angry that people were objecting to somebody he had actually basically chosen on his own, that he was talking about consensus. People don't have to agree with you automatically just because you are governor. And I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the sort of narrative that we actually been hearing around this question of consensus. Consensus is about people genuinely agreeing based on some kind of logic. So what we are actually seeing is people in authority using their authority, misusing their authority, making claims about consensus being built, when in fact they are trying to rig the system in a different way.
What is a picture of a true consensus?
It's where reasonable people sit down and think through what it is they actually want.
Not coercion.
You don't coerce. When you get into coercion, what you actually are achieving is basically authoritarian system. And so you can't be talking about consensus without talking about people actually thinking through and making a decision that's based purely on logic. That they are actually seeing the reason why this person is better for whatever reasons that they're actually coming up with. But it has to come through some sort of a process of people basically being persuaded, not being compelled.
This is a steady move away from the delegate system. One wonders if we are making progress or we're in retrogressive mode. Now, indications also suggest that PDP may also be heading in the direction of a consensus presidential candidate. In the papers yesterday, you saw the presidential aspirant Peter Obi screaming that consensus is not the solution. The solution is someone who is a problem solver and who will be able to take the country out of a wood.
There are no compelling reasons why you must have a consensus. You can actually play that and have the general public, because if the elites themselves can't actually come up with one person, at the end of the day, the person or the group of people who actually have responsibility for deciding on who they want to nominate or to elect is the citizens, the electorate involved. They are the ones who have this particular responsibility. So the whole idea that certain people have a right to decide who basically succeeds them, it's a complete nonsense. Really a complete nonsense, because in truth, that right, even based on the Constitution, that right comes, or it's actually basically embedded on the citizens, not the governor who is about to leave, and who could be actually looking to hide all kinds of other crimes committed against the same electorate. So you can't really count on the person who's leaving honestly and fairly determining who is best, because that responsibility was constitutionally given to citizens.
I'm sure you're bothered about internal democracy, because just like I asked CEO, one of the things it does is once we don't have transparency in the choices, let's assume that all of the major parties use their consensus, which is not consensus, and throws up whoever they want. The people are already changed. And so half of the elections are already done. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to choose from what they have thrown up. Is there any way you think we can begin to have better primaries so that we can get the best come out?
I think the biggest problem we have with managing those kinds of issues about money, we are not controlling the issues of money. Money is always very closely associated with basically criminal activities. And in this particular case, finding ways to essentially engage in some kind of electoral subterfuge. It's important that we have a system where the people who actually are running are somewhat limited, in terms of the resources that they are able to actually bring into the system. A good example is the challenge that we are seeing in the American system, where 90% of congressional processes, electoral processes, were actually won by the candidate with the most money. We are not in a position where money should be brought into the sort of processes that we have here, because the best candidates may not have any money, and we know for a fact that our own processes, when you bring in godfathers, presumably godmothers, when you bring these people in, what you do is you essentially create the basis around which our system will be corrupted and potentially lead to all kinds of problems that we are not really ready for. And so we have to remove money. I don't know how realistic that is because of where we have actually gotten to. But that has to be part of the what we must essentially push for from an electoral point of view.
Can we have elections without money? My guest yesterday said democracy is very expensive.
It has become very expensive, but also it's not really doing the job because you wind up shutting up those who have ideas, they don't have money. But what we really need are those people who have ideas, not people who have money and who come over there like, I think somebody from Kwara State said that democracy is about making noise. What kind of nonsense is that? Democracy is about making noise. This is somebody who has already been elected to Senate. And if you are going around making noise, it means you're not really speaking to the interests of the people that you are supposed to be representing. That you are not actually accounting for the resources that you are actually spending. And in fact, our system has become completely dominated by issues of money. And we have seen instances where politicians are being given, in terms of our rules currently, they are being given money that are not accounted for. These monies are essentially utilized in ways that are not necessarily in line with developmental interests that they are supposed to be about. And because they don't have reporting arrangements that are transparent and that actually prevent abuse. So why would you build these things into our system? We've actually seen a system that the elite, political elite, have completely abused through the choices that they are making, through the preferences that they are actually choosing. And those things have not contributed to transformative change and development in our country. But we continue with it. So we need to now remove that money from the system so that people don't go around with billion funds and things like that.
Who's going to remove it?
Well, the people.
The people don't even know there's a problem with the way it is.
And that gives us a lot of jobs too. In terms of trying to inform people, to actually get our people to begin thinking a bit differently from what it is that we've actually chosen. It's a difficult thing, but we've sat here and seen this being built. And unless something is done differently about it, I think this will continue and we will not get these results. It's not about, I think we've gone past where you are saying, one should say, well, look, we have a democratic system, but it's not performing. It's not really democratic.
One of the biggest challenges is the way the people think. You hear people say, he's a good candidate, but he doesn't have money. He's a good candidate, but he doesn't belong to a viable political party. That raises a lot of concerns. And then on the other part, how do we begin to create alternatives? For instance, in Enugu State, if you're not in PDP, for instance, you are not seen as a strong contender. Is it possible that we can ever come to a point where maybe not so popular party can dislodge the ruling party?
I think we are far from that right now in terms of where we are, because we are not seeing complementary kinds of activities taking place where you actually have good ideas coming from political parties that are now not so popular. But when you begin to actually have ideas, I think we need to go back and sort of re-look at what it is that we actually have chosen as part of the agreement within a particular state, within a particular community. We have a system in many states within this country, including this one, where things like local government elections are actually predetermined. And where you don't really have a true process in place. But people are quiet about it. But they are still expecting wonderful things to happen. We have people who actually go and basically, when they use their own resources, throw away their lifetime savings just to get a form. And we think it's okay. And we actually allow that to happen. To be honest with you, these form-driven monies to the political parties is a form of rigging their election. Because you're rigging out people who don't have the resources to actually invest, or who know that they are trying to actually volunteer their services. How can somebody who wants to volunteer services need to pay their life savings for an election, and you expect that that's where it ends? It cannot. So maybe the public, they're expecting wonderful things from individuals who actually have nothing of that sort in their minds, because they are looking to actually get the money back in the various ways that they get the money back. And so you can't expect something from nothing. That's part of the problem. And so we have to go back and rethink this issue with the expectation that sensible people will know that that individual who is saying that I'll give you these cups of rice, bundles of rice and various things, for how long will they feed you? Will they feed you for the next 4 years, or will they feed you for the next year even?
All right. And if politicians are really as powerful as they make the people believe that they are, why is it that they shy away from open contest? It's okay that a governor has a candidate. Put your candidate to the test as against other people who are vying. Why do they shy away from open contest?
Well, it's in a little results you don't want to see happen. Yeah, and the surest way to not actually being implicated in corrupt activities is to actually have somebody who protect you after you leave. Because you lose your immunity, you lose the capacity to actually engage in the ways that you would like ordinarily. And so you saw what happened to Obiano as he was leaving. Despite the document he has clearing him, saying he has a right to go, there was another document that said he didn't, which he wasn't aware of. And that basically resulted in him still being in the country. Now, all the governors, well, I wouldn't say all, but most of those governors have one thing or the other that probably worry them. And so they will prefer a system or a successor who can provide a measure of protection. You know, and for somebody who has actually done a fair, honest job, I don't think you would have anything to worry about. But when you've abused your authority in one way or the other, that's a logical sort of outcome that you would want. Somebody who potentially would basically protect you.
All right. Lastly, shouldn't INEC look critically into the processes that lead up to the primaries? Shouldn't they be more involved? And are they supposed to just be interested in whoever the parties throw up? Shouldn't they be more concerned about the internal democracies of parties?
I think we need to look back at the powers that the INEC has. It really should be concerned about who is being brought up. But also I think the INEC, or some sort of a legal norm, should be put in place around this question of people needing to pay huge amounts of money. I think in Enugu State it's about, for governorship, I think it's about 20 million plus some other payments that you are going to have at the end, probably something close to 30 million you spend. Where would you have actually gotten this money from? And why would you need to pay so much money? Because you want to serve. These are civil servants. These are people who actually are supposed to be providing service to the community. Why would they need to actually pay these kinds of fees to serve? There has to be a trick there. And the trick is that it's really corrupt, the system itself.
It appears the people are their own problems in this case.
They are. I think it's at the heart of the problem. Politics, defined, one popular definition is it's about essentially deciding what to do with resources that you have. And where individuals basically work in the interest of the community. There are all kinds of definitions around this, but what's important is that we don't see this, that we don't accept that politics essentially is about a very tiny community, and in this particular case, the political elite using resources that are public to essentially undermine the interests of the people that they're supposed to be actually catering for. That is at the heart of the problem. And when we operate in an environment where the distribution of these resources is actually goes to people that have actually been handpicked by those in authority, when that is the norm, then we have a problem. And I think we can't get out of that particular problem until people begin to realize that they actually are meant to have control. Constitutionally, that's the basic expectation. But when we continue to enable people and defend people who actually are stealing from their communities, removing the basis for development, for transformative change, then something wrong is actually happening. And we should not have or allow that these kinds of things should continue happening. But they have continued happening. So how do you change this? You change it by being aware and essentially campaigning for some kind of change that would remove those responsibilities from people like governors and other strong people within our system, operating as though they are beyond transparency, or beyond really needing to account for how they spent the past so many years managing the affairs of the people.
Now, there are narratives out there. One is that the people are as corrupt as their leaders. They probably haven't gotten the opportunity to explore that. Because if you see what they do, they don't seem to. I don't know whether we should attribute that to ignorance. On the other hand, people are saying, will you blame the people? They seem to be pauperized to a point where they just have to take whatever they get.
I think it would be wrong for people to actually think that they can get what they are. Whatever it is that they are meant to get. Because if you look at the resources, the way it's actually vivid, you will discover that you are worse off because you don't have good hospitals. You are worse off because you don't have good roads. You are disadvantaged because you don't have good schools. In one way or the other, you are paying way more than whatever money that you are getting. You are paying.
And sad, the children of these politicians don't use these facilities.
Many of them don't use the facilities, and we actually continue to allow that. For me, I don't see any reason why anybody should actually be making laws for you regarding what your schools should actually be about or try to achieve, when in fact their own children are outside of the country. They're essentially using resources from you to continue their studies elsewhere, where there are no student protests, where there are no lecturer protests.
Where ASU is not going on strike.
Yes.
Okay, lastly, it seems we must generate a critical mass of people who are enlightened politically to be able to do this. But the big question is, how can it be done?
Well, I think this is where our educational systems and various other systems that we have in the communities actually fail us. Our churches fail us. I guess the various, not just churches, mosques, and so on and so forth. They fail us because they are not engaging these issues in the way that they're supposed to. Universities, we have universities all over this country. Now, what are they doing? What are they teaching even their students? In terms of how it is that we are supposed to actually get our politics right so that the economics and the lives of our people will actually be right. Now, sometimes when I meet political scientists in Nigeria, I'm asking them, so what do you guys actually do? They are busy not really rethinking our politics. They are busy oftentimes doing other things like basically repeating studies or engaging in studies that basically reinforce the system as is. So there has to be very clear programs. And I say this to many university leaders. When you think about your university, what is the sort of student that you are looking to graduate at the end of that student's tenure in your system? What is the sort of person that you actually looking to graduate? We are graduating people who are barely able to look at these issues in a sort of creative way.
All right. That will be a discussion for another day. Thank you, Professor Fokeko Zadike. He is the Executive Director of Afro Heritage. Thank you, all of you that listened. We'll do that again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Do have a great day ahead of you.